Yeah, that's something that I want to focus on too.
Great.
Just okay. That's what they call it at your school, right? ADA.
No,
What do they call it at your school?
that's the name of the policy that
Right.
a lot of it's based on.
What do they call it at your school?
Um, AEC. So I think it's accommodations something.
All right. Well,
I don't know what it.
we're about to go live. So
Okay.
hello, everyone. Welcome to the Determined Show. I try to bring on a special guest each and every time so you can grab a piece of their testimony in hopes that you can gain inspiration, determination from what they share as we stack those pieces of inspiration and determination that becomes something beautiful on your journey. Today, I have someone special. It's Melissa White, who obtained her PhD, got into a severe car accident, then went on to get her master's in social work. But I also have on a very special co-host, Ann Tillinghast. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Ann. Hi, Ann. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
All right. Well, I live in Portland, Oregon, and I used to work in a stroke neurologist's office scheduling patients, and I spoke to a lot of patients on the phone over 14 years. And they would call and ask for support groups, resources, and we at the hospital had nothing. We didn't know what was going on in the local community. And later I decided that I wanted to start a community music group. And then I learned that music and singing actually helps heal the brain. So I started a sing-along music group called the Backstrokes. These days, a few of the Backstrokes members and I are working on the Northwest Brain Network. And our goal is to connect new survivors, brain injury and stroke survivors, to resources, hopefully before they leave the hospital. We want to get them plugged in so that they can speak with other survivors. The whole group, besides me, are all survivors, and we just want to connect people to the survivors, to the people who know where the resources are.
Right.
Basically.
Right. So basically, you're trying to bridge the gap that most of us are left trying to search, because essentially we once we're discharged from the hospital, we're basically left with, a little pamphlet. Hey, this is what you went through, and then we leave the hospital and we're like, okay, so yeah, I get what I had, but what do I do next? So essentially Northwest Brain Network is trying to bridge that gap of, the unknown, once you're discharged. So that's the mission, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of how we're doing that is by creating content like this.
Awesome. Yay. Woo woo. Backstrokes back. All right. Sorry. I like the Backstreet Boys. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in there. You know what I mean? So.
We need that.
Right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Melissa White. We want to hear all about Melissa White's journey.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning,
Thanks for having
Melissa.
me, Mark.
Yes. How are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm a little nervous.
There's no reason to be nervous. It's, just like a normal Saturday morning, we're just sitting here chit-chatting. It's
Hmm.
all good. It's all good. So why don't you go ahead and give a little brief synopsis of who Melissa is.
I I grew up in Oregon. I moved to the East Coast 20 years ago. Pursued my PhD. Um, that took a long time,
Hmm.
and then I was so grateful I finally finished. And then I was traveling with my new then boyfriend, and we were in a serious car accident. And that was 2013,
Wow.
2014. Um, and so I was actually plopped into a new community I didn't even know about.
Yeah. So what so you suffered what from the car accident?
I I was mostly aware at the time of my broken leg. So I
Okay.
shattered my tibia, so I couldn't walk. I had a few broken ribs, and the left side of my face was numb, and that couldn't move for about a year.
Oh.
Um, and so that was the part that I was kind of, and also one of my fingers was broken, so I couldn't really like use my phone. So when I was in the hospital for a month, that was most of the stuff I thought was important. I was
Yeah.
thinking about healing, and getting to walk again and being able to drive again. But I wasn't really understanding my brain injury,
Hmm.
because I think brain injuries can kind of do this thing where you want to focus on the things you can actually do something about right now.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really do anything about my brain injury right then, just because I was very confused. I couldn't find words. I was still saying I want to grade my students' papers, but I only had a few nouns, and I would just say random sentences that didn't make a lot of sense to anyone else. So I had aphasia,
Yeah.
and so I did a lot of rehab on walking again. I was in Portland again, and I saw Anne then, so she saw me right in the low point. And then I finally got to walk again, and I was very happy, and I got to go back home in New York, and that's when the healing really started. And so I think I found all the doctors that I needed, the neurologist, went to visit them, and I would be so excited about these appointments, thinking they're going to really fix this. I was
Mm.
starting to figure out, like, oh, I can't really read, can't really, writing a sentence was really hard.
Hmm.
This is the stuff I used to be really good at. I used to be a good cook, and I couldn't really read a recipe anymore. And I was confused about the things. Even like taking a shower was hard. I couldn't really figure out what was wrong. And I wanted someone to diagnose it. And, the brain injury had been diagnosed. I had a severe traumatic brain injury.
Right.
But the doctors were just kind of saying, well, the tests look good. You're fine. And I was very frustrated by that. I was
Yeah.
like, my whole life went 180. Like, I can't do the work I used to do. I was starting to realize that, like, is this going to not get better? And so I had a good friend who, I'm kind of a professional nerd. So
Hmm.
even though I could hardly write or read, I was still Googling things and trying
Yeah.
to find out what I should do. And a friend had recommended a support group for brain injury where I was. And so I started going, and that was life changing for me, because I started meeting other survivors. And I had only been in that area for a couple of years. And so I didn't really know a lot anyway where I was. And I certainly didn't know anything about social services, getting disability benefits, the kinds of rehab and the doctors in the area that would help me, for what I needed, when my neurologist didn't know any of it. My
Hmm.
primary doctor didn't know any of it.
Hmm.
So I was really amazed that the survivors could connect me to those resources.
How did you meet the first survivor?
Yeah, that was through Brain Injury Association. So I went to the website, and I just looked up, the area where I was, and there was a support group. in the town I was in.
And how
And
long
so,
was that? Sorry.
sorry,
How long was that after your actual injury?
I think 2 years. The survivors, that was huge.
Yeah.
And they started telling me things, okay, you need to get disability benefits.
Mhm.
You need to get Medicare. Cause I was just like, I didn't have health insurance again. Cause
Oh,
my job,
yeah.
my job was like, well, you can't teach anymore. So you don't work here anymore.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have health insurance. Um, and, and so that was really stressful. I had to get on Medicare, I had to get on Medicaid, and I got on food stamps, and that wasn't super helpful for me, um, but it was, like I finally got connected to social services, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that was important because there was a fantastic cognitive rehab in Albany, New York, um, neuropsychological services,
Hmm.
neuropsychological rehabilitation services. And it was expensive, and they billed Medicare and they billed Medicaid for it. And so I had to get on Medicaid to pay for my services. And when I got accepted there, that the survivors told me about, none of my doctors knew about it, but they all had done something like it, or they knew about this program. And so they put me into sort of an educational setting that was like a mix between education and rehabilitation.
Hmm.
And some of it was counseling. And so it was kind of a mix. I think it was about 12 hours a week we did that. And I did it for 14 months.
Wow.
And so we did it through sort of cycles. We would have like 3 months and then a break and then 3 months. And so people would kind of come and go. And so the idea is they would sort of say, okay, well, I think you're ready to move on to something else. And so most people would stay for, a year, and I did too. Yeah, it was a lot of, focusing on what my cognitive disability problems were. And some of them, funnily enough, existed before my brain injury, because we all have cognitive deficits.
Oh yeah,
All
for
of us
sure.
do. All
Yeah.
of us do. And so I think my first problem I needed to focus on was I couldn't focus and finish something. And I was like, did you know it took me 11 years to write a dissertation? That was before the brain injury.
Right. Right.
So that was, and then you do a lot of practicing. They give you a list of strategies, what your biggest thinking problem is. And then you basically kind of repeat it every day. You just kind of repeat. And then you do a lot of these exercises about focusing, about socialization, memory games. It was really interesting. It was all organized by psychologists and educational, and they were very focused on this kind of method. And I still can't even count the ways that changed how I live my life. And it was a lot of just being able to focus. And I don't know, I think one cycle I got a new poster, like it had all my thinking problem and my strategies, and I needed to kind of read them aloud and over the months memorize them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was overwhelmed. I think the term I used is flooded.
Yeah.
Just looking at it to read it, and it stressed me out. And so I realized I needed a mantra, because I couldn't really read all the words, but to kind of remind myself of what the goal is. And so I asked my Facebook friends for mantras, and I read the poster multiple times. But the important thing was I figured out a mantra that was helpful for me through my rehab. And it was less is more.
There you go.
And it was about like I needed to pull away all of the things that I was trying to put my attention and my energy on, and figure out what really matters the most. And sometimes it was just like, I need to rest.
Yeah.
I needed to be aware of how tired I was,
Mm-hmm.
and, just take a week off. I needed to learn to do that. And I wasn't doing it immediately. And then it was surprising how much that changed things for me. If I just say, okay, I'm going to take a week off, and then I can maybe read a news article for the first time in a year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can finally, I can ask my aide. That was one of the benefits I asked for. I didn't ask for, but my rehab said, oh, there's all these different services you should try. with your disability. And I was like, well, I don't even, I don't think I need those things, but they wanted me to try them anyway. And I did. And I was really surprised how helpful it was having an aide. And it was, and that one of the main things that she did, she would come like once a week. It was paid for by Medicaid. And so I would ask her to read a recipe to me. And so I would cook while she would read the recipe to me. She was like my Alexis. And so, but it was cool because she was younger and she really wasn't an experienced cook. And so she felt like she was learning from just helping me cook.
There you go.
And so we had a great time doing that. And then I got, over time, slowly, neuroplasticity was working in my favor.
Boom.
And finally, I was able to do some of those things again.
Boom.
But a lot of it was just minimalizing. It was just like, I have to not, like talking right now, I can't have other screens open. I can't have my phone on. I can't try to multitask. That just doesn't exist, I think. But, but yeah, less is more.
100%. Now, Anne, so she was speaking on having to go and find basically she searched and just happened to stumble upon this group who helped her out tremendously, so she did it all on her own. Now, Northwest Brain Network is focusing on helping survivors in this aspect, correct?
Yep. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yes, we want survivors to be communicating with each other in our network through newsletters, blogs, videos, emails. And so on the one hand, we want to present information and make it, put it on our webpage, write a newsletter article about it. But we also want to engage people so that they're talking to each other. We want more experienced survivors to be able to talk to brand new survivors and say, you're going to keep getting better. Don't listen to what they say. You're going to keep getting better. And since our network is made up of stroke survivors, that is where we're going to find the resources that we are trying to just bring to light.
Yes.
Put them somewhere so you can go somewhere and see.
Yeah, and that's exactly, what Melissa alluded to. That's how she found the resources herself, was through these other stroke survivors that she connected with.
And Melissa is a very powerful researcher. I've never spoken to anybody who's done the research, and she also, if something is presented, she'll find out what that means. What is everything that's presented? How do I use this service?
Yeah.
And that just really, I've spoken to a lot of survivors over the last 20 years, and I think, Melissa, you are, that's a talent you had before your head injury and afterwards.
Biased.
Yeah.
Professional nerd, as you put it.
Yeah.
That, and that's kind of a perfect segue into, the next phase that we're going to go in this interview. So you had your TBI, or you got your PhD, then you had your TBI, and then you decided to go back to school, right, Melissa?
Yeah. I mean, I still don't think I could do the work I used to do.
Yeah.
And that's a hard acceptance I had to make, and it took me a couple of years. But the other hand is, I also was wanting to leave that field anyway. In some ways, it wasn't great for me in other ways. So I started volunteering when my rehab started. They recommended that I, figure out something to do, not just focusing on myself all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great. And so, I don't know, in my literature research, I was really interested in grief and mourning and death in literature. And so I said, I had kind of an interesting epiphany too. I was trying to write these thank you notes all these people had given me gifts and cards and letters when I was in the hospital, when I was recovering. And I had like this stack of thank you notes I needed to write. And like I said, even writing a sentence or sending a letter was really, really hard, but I felt like really obliged. I needed to do that. And so I was trying to do like one a day.
Mm-hmm.
And right around that time, I got an email from a friend. And while I suffered my brain injury and was healing from it, her mother had brain cancer and died very suddenly, like within a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this email to my friend, and I just felt it. And I just sat down and I wrote her like a whole letter on email and sent it. And then I said, wait, what just happened? Like I just poured out like a whole like page of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think I could write one sentence or just write the address on an envelope.
Uh-huh.
And so that was kind of an epiphany for me. I was like, this is what motivates me, is helping people when they're hurt, especially in grief.
Yeah.
And so that day when I wrote that letter, I had we didn't have good Wi-Fi where I was. So I picked up an old phone book and I started finding the hospice, because I'd heard of hospice, but I didn't really know exactly what hospice was. And it's a little scary, and I wasn't even sure, but something just pulled me to I just find the hospice where I was.
Mm-hmm.
I pick up the phone and I call, and I get connected to the grief counselor. And she was so generous and kind and listened to me for probably a full hour when I just called and said, I'm really confused, but I don't really know what I should do right now, but I think this is what I'm supposed to do. And she's like, you need to come down and you need to come to a support group. And I did. And I talked about a loss I experienced a long time ago. Most of people, they were talking about someone who died in a year, usually through hospice. And I was like, well, my dad died 40 years ago. But it was actually important that I came as a client first. Mm-hmm. And then they said, if you're really interested in going further in this, become a volunteer. And so I did. And I helped with Bereaved Kids Camp. And I helped with an after-school program, kids who'd lost a parent. And then I started visiting people who were dying and give their family a break to be caregivers for just a few hours. And then I got to do witnessing someone who was actually dying. And I learned a lot. I did that for about, a couple of years. And I moved to another state and I did it in another place too. And then I kind of focused more on the grief counseling part. And so, it was, after I moved to California, and I did about a year of, volunteering as a grief counselor in a couple of places, and I got a lot of training. And I said, you know what? I think this is really what I want to do. And I think I can do this. I was volunteering for a couple hours a week, and I kept thinking, what if I do a little more? I don't know. Maybe I can. I don't know. And so the big plunge was I applied to school, and I found out years ago, when I was figuring out my benefits, that if I wanted to go back to school, because I was on Social Security for my disability, they would work really hard to support me to not be taking Social Security.
Yeah.
And they will do so much as to pay my college tuition to do that.
Uh-huh.
And so I had to get I had to get a counselor at Department of Rehabilitation in California, and so they met with me a couple times. They said, yeah, you're a great fit. Go ahead and try. We're going to support you every way we can for you to get the career, not just any job, but the job you want and that you're good at doing.
There you go.
And I was like, this is an amazing thing. I didn't even think anyone would do that for me ever. And so I was like, yeah, this is really what I want to do. So I talked to all the people who had the jobs I wanted, and they said, you should really get a master's in social work. So I really explored this too, because I'm a nerd. I was like, which is the right degree? Mm-hmm. What school should I go to? Mm-hmm. And it turns out for rehabilitation through the state, I had to go to one of the public schools in California. And so I applied and was accepted to San Jose State. And I started there in the fall. And that was a big plunge for me, because I was not working. I was not doing anything more than a few hours a day for quite a while. But I knew that my energy had ticked up. Like I was sleeping better. I was still getting a lot of migraines. I still can get confused easily and forget what I'm doing. My working memory, I don't think is getting better.
Mm-hmm.
I still have to write a lot of things down. Like I wrote down kind of people's names and who I'm talking to today. But you know, my rehab was really helpful for me to find strategies to do that. And
Melissa, you had mentioned something before in talking about your epiphany. Also, was the therapists? I think you said, the therapists that were the most helpful to you found out what mattered to you.
Yeah. I had started seeing a therapist who, you know, I was like really confused about my identity. I was like, I don't know who I am if I'm not an English professor anymore. Mm-hmm. And she'll say like, oh, you know, you still were. And I was like, no, but that's not, like, even when I was doing it, I didn't feel like that's who I was. Mm-hmm. Like my identity was not that. And then I had that epiphany. And then there was another thing that happened around that time, which was when I started seeing this therapist, and there was a shocking development, which was she had experienced a traumatic loss, right around the same time as I was her new client, talking about, I'm a hospice volunteer and I'm interested in grief counseling. Mm-hmm. And even though she's a professional counselor, mm-hmm. she did not know where the services were, like if she wanted grief counseling. Mm-hmm. She just didn't know. And so I was emailing with her. I was seeing her as a client, you know, in her office, but then I was emailing with her and saying, here's how you can find grief counseling. Here's a camp for your other kid. And, you know, here's the way that you can do that. And so that was really important for me to feel like I could kind of stick my head out of the sand and say like, oh, I can actually see things too that not everyone else can, right?
Yeah.
I can kind of help that, you know, with sharing that with other people.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, you know, I went back to school after, you know, I had my injury.
Yeah.
You went back to school after you had your injury. So did you find it, and I should have mentioned, obviously, you know, we already mentioned at the beginning, you got your PhD. So did you find it more taxing after you had your injury, excuse me, studying, test, you know, all of the above?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I'm so glad you focused me on that. You know, I feel like I'm a really different student I am now. And I was very worried when I started, like, am I going to be able to do this at all? Am I going to be too tired? Am I not going to remember anything I read? Mm-hmm. I have to be in front of the screen for hours. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have 2 internships a week for 8 hours each. I haven't worked 8 hours in 6 years. I don't know how that is. And I was really surprised. The first important thing I did was I got in touch with the accommodation services at my school, because DOR also said, go to the accommodations. You might not think you need them, but do it. And I was like, okay, I will try everything.
Let's pause right there for a second. So the accommodation services for the school are what? What do they help you with?
Yeah, so they've given me a lot of software, and the most important one that I started using and didn't think I needed, but now I use it for everything, even for personal things, not just for school. And it's called Natural Reader, and it's software on my computer that will read textbooks to me. Very cool. So I follow the PDF or the print copy at the same time as I'm listening, and I can kind of do it at a higher speed, and I can read almost as quickly as just I used to. And I think I can retain the material better. Like my working memory is not great. So if I read something 4 days ago and then I have a class about it, I have to kind of look over again. Mm-hmm. But usually the visual will kind of remind me like, oh, right, the theme of this reading was about that. Or I'll make some notes and I'll look at them and it'll kind of prompt the memory. But no, and I was surprised how well I did. But I had to say, some of my classmates, they have like kids at home, full-time jobs, they're doing things in quarantine. I was really surprised how well I did, because a lot of it was I had to kind of push everything else away. Mm-hmm. Like I was like, okay, I'm not cooking, I'm not going to the gym, I'm not, I can't really, go outside. I mean, I go outside, but like, I can't go do like the social stuff. And
Hmm.
obviously that makes sense with COVID, but even before COVID, that was the strategy I had to use,
Yeah.
because I can't take on too much. And then I thought I was really proud of myself. I finished my semester. I got good grades. I didn't fail anything. I had to miss one day of my classes because of migraine, but I don't know, out of two-thirds out of the days, I still get headaches. But I think and some of them are not that bad. And so I just I'm used to them now.
Yeah. Very cool. Very awesome.
Yeah.
And all schools have that, and it's a disability office that you go and visit, and it's just a matter of filling out paperwork, and they offer those services. I use the services as well,
Mhm.
and they give you extra time for tests. They offer a note taker to
Yeah.
you, and we talked about this before we got on here. If you have the services available to you, it's not a pride thing.
Yeah.
Take them, use them to your advantage.
I had that moment. I was like, am I cheating? Like I definitely had this like moral moment where I was like, wait, I could probably do the reading,
Uh-huh.
but will I understand it and get through it at the ease that this makes it work for me? No, this is not cheating. This is me at my best,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And I want
100%.
everyone to try it, try the services that you have available, because you might not be aware of the fact that you need it and that you benefit from it. You might not be aware. And yeah, you're right. It's a pride thing.
100%.
Get over
100%.
it.
Yeah. 100%. And what's kind of ironic is you were telling your story and whatnot, and we when we suffer our stroke or our TBI, we essentially, how I word it is, we get punched in the gut, slapped in the face,
Mhm.
and our life gets shifted into a different direction. And I didn't get to mention this last show about Ethan, but you and Ethan are you know the epitome of not giving up or setting new goals and milestones after what we endure, and reaching for them and striving to achieve them, and not letting what happened to us stand in our way, where you know many of us, we tend to use it kind of like as an excuse, and that's not any shade on those that do. It's just a matter of, that's why we do this show. In the beginning, I say, I try to bring on guests so that they can share their testimony, grab pieces of inspiration and hope. And that's exactly, why I brought on Ethan. That's exactly why I brought on you. They're exactly you guys are sharing what you went through, how you went through it, and where you have gone and going. So, I appreciate, you coming on and doing that for everyone to watch and see and bring into, hopefully grab a piece of that puzzle and insert it into their journey. Now, do you have any, you kind of said already, about how you use the reader to help you read, and you read along with it. So that's kind of two ways for you to uh, soak in the knowledge or the information. So when you're studying for a test, do you have any information or advice on how to prepare for a test for those that are watching?
It's tricky. I know before I moved here and I was kind of exploring career possibilities, I had taken a civil service test in New York because I was like, oh, maybe I get a job through the state. Maybe that's what I should do.
Hmm.
And I asked for accommodations, So they gave me a quiet room by myself. I got extra time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the way I aced the test, but it was because I practiced the test like 4 times in a row before I did it.
Mm.
So I got all the practice tests. I think the first one I did, I got like a D. And I just kept practicing. And in some ways, I think taking the test it's about taking the test. Like there's all this kind of negotiation about, it's not always about what the knowledge is. It's like how well you read the test. And I don't know, like we don't have a lot of testing so far in my grad school this time, but I know that will come up if I want my licensure to
Yeah.
be a licensed social work clinician, social worker. So I don't know how I'm going to do that yet. That's another journey I have in the future, because I think I will have to memorize a bunch of stuff to
For
do
sure.
that well. But I'll do a bunch of practice tests and I'll find out
There
what
you go.
my gaps are.
What I did for mine is I called it subconscious studying.
Mm.
So what I did is I laid out. So music is a different part of the brain where you memorize music. And what I did is I took my notes and I used a program called Audacity.
Oh, yeah.
And I read my notes on Audacity, recorded on Audacity. Then I took a beat from a song and overlaid it on Audacity. So I would just listen to it on repeat. And then when I would go to sleep, it would be on repeat when I was sleeping. And then, I'd wake up in the morning and look over my notes and it would kind of like just be embedded,
Mm-hmm.
in my brain. So I called it subconscious studying. If that's what it's called, I don't know, but that's what I called it, and so that's what I did. And it helped out tremendously, you know, and it was my own notes, my own handwritten notes. So yeah,
I
that's what
love
I did.
hearing that, Mark.
Yeah,
I'm totally going to use that hack.
for sure. For sure.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Audacity is a free program.
Mhm.
You just go on the web, download it. It's usually on your computer already, but if it's
I
not, you
think,
can.
yeah, I was using a bunch of those like voice to record different things. Even when I was writing my dissertation before the TBI, it was like I was trying all these different hacks for writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I know about that software. I will try that. That's
Yeah,
great. Thank you.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then I would try to stay away from necessarily a song that you like or know, because then you're
When
gonna
I
get
would
it.
confuse the
You're
lyrics.
gonna get it. Yeah, you're gonna get it mixed up and start singing that song that you like. You know what I mean? Instead of the notes that you're written down for yourself.
That's a great idea. I know I definitely, in my former career, I definitely used music to motivate me when I was grading or when I was writing. And I would always do stuff without lyrics. And I have done that sometimes now, like if I'm really kind of pushed up to, I got to write a paper, I've got 3 hours, I got to do this, that helps me a lot to have some ambient, like with a beat music
Mm-hmm.
in the
Yeah,
background to keep my energy up.
for sure, for sure.
Better than a
Now,
Red Bull.
right, right. Now, Anne, do you have any concluding thoughts for our community?
Well, the thing that stood out to me from Melissa's story is really finding what you want. And I think you had mentioned earlier that like the occupational therapists, the physical therapists, if you can find one that finds out what you want to do, how you want to, what do you need to improve your hand for, what's most important to you, then those are the best and the most motivating therapists, helpers. I think that's a way to identify someone who, instead of just, okay, I have to fill out this sheet of check marks, and so I need you to, okay, do this, okay, now do this, and you don't know why you're doing it. This is what I've heard. You don't know why you're doing it. You don't know the purpose of it, except that they're going to get to bill for it. And And so that's what I learned from you. That's the inspiration I took from you today, because I need that in my own life as well. If I want to do something, I'll spend endless, I have so much energy for it. And if it's something I don't want to do, but I feel like I should do, it's more painful. And I think recovery, and even if not recovery, but just living our lives, how great if we allow ourselves to follow our own spirit,
Mhm.
and our individuality.
I love it. All right, Melissa, do you have any concluding thoughts for our community?
I learned from you all today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for, sharing your testimony. And, just to kind of piggyback off of what the whole thing was about and piggyback off of what Anne was saying, basically kind of what Anne was saying in a nutshell, is to realize what your goals are. So
Mhm.
no matter what the task is at hand, you're always focused on, the goal. So no matter how mundane the task is, you're always there. So what I did when I was going to school is I wrote on my mirror, you're not only doing this for yourself, but you're doing this for everyone else.
Mhm.
Explicit. So the explicit is not gonna be aired on on this show, but you get what I'm saying. So so when that motivation was not there to get up and do my schoolwork, I would read that and it was right there in my face. I would read it and be like, okay, it's not just for me. This is for my future and whatnot. Because I started school knowing that my life was going nowhere, that nobody was going to be with someone that was just living at their parents' house because I had to move back in with my parents and working at a gas station. I knew that my life needed to be changed around. So I started going back to school. And that's when I wrote, that on my mirror. And, essentially my life did change around. I found my wife, 4 kids, and all that jazz, all because I consciously made that change. It's all about flipping that switch, setting that goal, making that change, writing that message down. One of my things that I say is set your goals high, screw the moon, reach for Mars, set it high, stay focused on your goals. When an obstacle comes in your way, don't let it be a brick wall. Make sure it's a hurdle because you're continuing to focus on your goal. With that being said, again, Melissa, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your testimony. It's a beautiful, journey that you had, and I want to wish you the best of luck in your continued studies. Outstanding job on your first semester,
Thank you.
crushing it. It's always rewarding, knowing that you put in so much work and getting, those grades back. It's totally rewarding. I graduated with a 3.8 in my master's program. Hard work does pay off. So keep at it, keep crushing it. And Anne, as always, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on and co-hosting with me. I appreciate you. So I conclude my shows with a prayer. So let's get to it.
Thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing Melissa to come on and share her testimony with our community in hopes that she can help pave a path for others to follow. I ask that you watch over our community as they continue in the rehabilitation process. And I ask that you continue to, in these dire times, that you continue to bless our community. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.